Jenna Fisher.
And I'm Angela Kinsey.
And together we have the podcast Office Ladies.
Just because we finished rewatching The Office does not mean we're going anywhere.
Every Wednesday, we'll be sharing even more exclusive stories from The Office and our friendship with brand new guests. Plus, you can revisit all the Office Ladies rewatch episodes every Monday with new bonus tidbits before every episode.
So follow and listen to Office Ladies on the free Odyssey app and wherever you get your podcasts.
So a couple of weeks ago, as you know, Dennis and Beck got married. They took dancing lessons beforehand. They can salsa, they can tango, they can swing dance. I think maybe also the Watusi, a little flamenco perhaps. The lambada, that's still forbidden. But you and everyone else are welcome to shimmy on over here to the Back Nine.
This is the Back Nine with Dennis Williams and Josh Mora.
Yeah, Dennis, I still can't get enough talking about the wedding.
You might be working fast and loose with completely learned. We're kind of introduced to it and we have a lot of practice in, but I mean, the dance coaches tell you need 300 to 500 hours to actually learn the whole parts of the dance.
Yeah.
So not quite there yet, but we're steps, no pun intended, ahead of most people.
I did dancing lessons when I was getting married 100 years ago, and I've taken a couple of one-off classes here and there, or done a couple. I have rhythm, right? I mean, I do have rhythm. In general, I have rhythm.
Are you implying I made a face at that?
You completely made a face at that. But when I have to learn programmed dances, I get way up into my head, and I start trying to count and figure out where my feet are going instead of just going with the music.
Right. Well, you got to get to the point on a couple of those, like we've tried to get to with salsa in particular and bachata, which is another great Spanish dance. You got to get to the point where the steps become intuitive, and then if you make a mistake, you can just kind of wing it. That's probably the point we're at. We've gotten to the point where we have enough of a base that we can be better freelancers, but we're not really professionals.
Understood.
But it's crazy because I have a daughter who's a pre-professional ballerina and a very accomplished dancer. So for that perspective, I have two left feet.
Yeah, we just admire what Daddy can do. And I expect that you'll be dancing at our first anniversary party, which is coming up, right? So this is the last episode here of season 5, which takes us into our first anniversary and something special that's coming up for the podcast.
Yeah, we're going to do a live show, our first ever live to tape, basically. Yeah. We'll probably put it on Instagram Live and Facebook Live, and then we'll do the episode on the actual launch day on a Tuesday. Next week. So it'll be an hour long, and we're going to have live guests, and we're going to be on remote. We're looking at a place right now. We'll finalize that with some promotion leading in. So yeah, it's going to be awesome. Looking forward to it.
We're looking forward to having you join us there. But before we get there, we have a terrific episode coming up, we believe, because we have a guy who has a podcast that has achieved beyond what ours has already. This is my friend Matt Gilhooly, with whom I used to work on a couple of different occasions. And his podcast, Life Shift, won the Earworthy Independent Podcast of the Year Award. And it is an astonishing podcast. And Matt, it's so good to have you with us. And it really is. I say that not lightly at all. I'm fascinated by what you have created and what you have presented. Maybe talk about here at the beginning what Life Shift is. Let me put it in a little more context. We go kind of wide with middle-aged life, right? Talking about all the things that happen in middle-aged life, including shifts that we make in personal and professional lives. You go narrow on that life shift, that pivot point, and yours happened early. So you can talk about that, talk about the origin of the podcast to get us started here.
Sure. Well, first of all, congratulations on a year.
Thank you.
That's awesome. I understand that feeling, and it's been a wild ride, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. But yeah, the life shift, I talk to people about the pivotal moment in their life that's changed everything. And I think naively, I went into this thinking everyone just has one main life shift, and that's not true. Right. We have lots of shifts in our lives. And so I try to get people to kind of think about what is that moment in your life where really everything from before and after was different. And the whole thing really stems from my own personal experience. When I was 8, I was visiting my father. My parents lived thousands of miles apart, and my mom died in a motorcycle accident. And at that moment, when my dad had to sit me down and tell me everything about what my life was going to be was no longer, and everything was going to be different after that. And growing up, this was like 80s, 90s. So people weren't really talking about like how to help a grieving child. So in my mind, it was like, do other people have these singular moments where just everything is totally different moving forward? Turns out everyone has lots of them. Yeah. But I've had the opportunity to talk to people about that, and it's just been so fulfilling.
So do you I mean, we actually know a little bit about yours, and there's just such a crazy irony because Josh and I both worked in Buffalo. That's how we met. We met in Buffalo, and we know what happened in that area. So that's crazy. But are there any things that stand out to you in your other pivotal moments? Obviously, that's so compelling, but because you know that people have more than one, do you look back and now know that I've had more than one? Like, has that happened to you?
I do now. I don't know that I did before I had these like really open conversations with a bunch of strangers across the world. I think we kind of just sometimes go through life and just we make changes and then we don't take the time to reflect on them. And I think in the reflection is when we realize that these were actually pivots, because sometimes it's like a phone call or it's something that your boss said to you one day that just like triggers something and you decide you're going to walk away from your life and you're going to do something totally different. But until we actually sit down and like think about like really find that moment that it happens, I don't think we realize that these are pivots. So for me, I had the misfortune of that early life shift and then the 20 years that it took me to kind of fix it or understand it. And that at that moment, once I started understanding, okay, this is how this has affected me, and these are all the bad things I did because of it, and these are all the good things I did because of it, then I'm now able, like every time I do something new, I'm able to reflect on that and think, okay, what did I learn from this? How am I different? How do I move forward? What do I do when it happens again? So I think you have to be able to reflect, which is the short way of answering that really long thing that I just said.
Has that helped you hear other people as they talk to you about pivot moments? Has it helped you bring that out in other people? And does your experience with having a pivot moment, again, so early and being able to discover self-awareness, even much after the incident itself, does that help you bring that out from other people?
If I'm speaking for other people, I would hope so. I've had people come on where they feel comfortable enough to share something that they've never shared publicly before, like a particular moment. Maybe people saw the outside transformation, but they don't know why it happened. So. I think having my own traumatic experiences allows me to hold the space for someone that's also had a traumatic experience, because I can come at it with curious questions based on my own experience. It doesn't mean that my experience was exactly what they went through, but the curiosity, I think, allows that open space for people to feel comfortable saying, actually, no, that's not how it felt, but this is how it actually felt for me. So I would say you kind of have to have some of these moments to be able to hold the space for someone that's also kind of reflecting in real time.
Why is it important in your perspective? You kind of touched on this. Maybe go a little deeper for our listeners. Why is it important for us to key in, especially on the back nine, to those pivotal moments in our life?
Well, I think it gives us the opportunity to really see how we've grown or how we've kind of gone backwards or changed things on us, and like what was life before those moments and how can I like learn from it so that next time, because there's going to be a next time, or someone else in your life is going to experience something and you're able to bring kind of, this is what I've learned, or this is what I would never do again because of X, Y, and Z. So I think that as humans, we should spend more time thinking about these things. And there's so much of this performative culture where we are just trying to hit the next milestone, trying to check the next box, and we don't take the time to like look back and see how we got here. I think if more people did that, I think we would have more pivots in like a positive way and not this reactionary kind of thing, but more of a proactive kind of, oh, I see that really served me in this way. Maybe I can intentionally choose to do something in that way to bring me to a new point. So I think we're getting there. I think more people are doing it, but I would encourage everyone to do it.
And that may just be because we get to the back nine and we want to take the time to understand a little bit more.
Right.
What are the kinds of things that people are sharing with you? What are the things that have surprised you from some of your guests as they reveal about themselves, or the moments that have been pivotal for them?
Some of the surprises have been where people like they'll kind of pitch themselves. They'll tell me this is the story that they're going to say. And then they come on, they're like, I've listened to a couple episodes, actually going to change my mind. I'm going to tell you about the time that my husband cheated on me, or I'm going to tell you about the time that I did this really terrible act and I've never told anyone before, but I want other people to realize that like you can recover from some of these things. So those are the most surprising. I think for me personally, in my own journey, the one that was the most surprising to me was one in which a woman was sharing her story of losing her father when she was younger. And the things that she did as a teenager, she was talking about these things, and it started validating my own experiences. I think we think back on some of the things we've done over the years and we're ashamed of them, or we're like, why did I do that? Why did I think that way? And her particular story made me feel like, oh, what I did that felt really not normal was actually normal. And I think it's in those validating moments that kind of are the most rewarding for me, and the ones that are like sometimes still surprising. You know, in my 40s, I feel like, oh, maybe I should have already realized that.
Yeah.
But then you have this conversation and you're like, I didn't, you know, and so the surprise is like, this is still healing me.
We'll be right back.
Friends, over the last few seasons, we've introduced you to our friend Pete, or more to the point, our friends at Pete. Pete is the present and future of corporate training. It's a proprietary platform that allows mid-sized companies to build relevant, contemporary training programs quickly, efficiently, and inexpensively. With Pete's AI-powered platform, you'll get customized, interactive, threaded curriculum built in a fraction of the time at a fraction of the cost. Whether it's compliance, leadership, sales strategies, technical skills, employee onboarding, or anything your company needs for its ongoing training and culture demands, Pete designs and delivers exactly what you are looking for: fast, efficient, and effective. With Pete, you can focus on what matters most: developing your employees and growing your business. Pete, corporate training reimagined. Visit Pete.com, that's PETE.com, to learn more and get started today.
All right, back to the show.
How do you find the people that you want to talk to, and how do you vet like who you're going to go through this with? I mean, you could be interviewing us right now in our pivotal moments. My brain is spinning with what are mine, and I mean, I know a couple of them because we've talked about them on the show, but because we are introspective about that kind of stuff. But what are some of the things that attract you to people or get people to you on your podcast?
So I will say that I've been fortunate, and I have not had to seek out a guest myself since October 2022.
Wow.
So I am pitched pretty regularly. And I think there's a benefit because it's a human story, right? So everyone has a human story. It's just whether or not you've taken the time to reflect on it. But over that time, I have gotten better. I haven't always been great at vetting particular guests. And it's hard to do because it's like, are you sure you've really thought about your personal experience and how it's changed you? So I'm trying to find the ways, but I do kind of push back on people to really find a very specific moment. And I hear from people a lot where they're like, it was a really good exercise for me to kind of narrow that down. Because sometimes they'll like, I went through this period of caretaking for someone for 6 months. And you're like, that is a pivotal period, but is there a moment in which like the person passed away, or you got a phone call, or like how specific can we get? And so that's usually my biggest pushback before I kind of go forward with the guest. But I've talked to 162 people now. So
wow, that's pretty amazing. I would imagine that there are some stories of incredible triumph. I'm a victor. I've overcome this. Are there also stories where people have said, yeah, that sent me, even though this was pivotal, and even though I think I'm mostly okay now, it sent me into a deep, deep spiral, or whatever it did. I don't try to necessarily characterize any one or the other. I mean, so when people are having those reflections that were maybe not quite so positive, how do you present that in the podcast?
I think we just be real. I think we have to acknowledge the fact that we're not always great, and we're not always triumphant, and there are hard parts. And I talk to people a lot about how I relate to most stories their valleys of their stories, not the peaks of the mountains, not the big awards that they've won, not the amazing promotions that they got. I can't relate to those as much. And maybe it's just me and my own personal stories, but I really relate to when people are struggling and what does that human experience look like when you're struggling? Like, how do you get out of bed that day? How do you move through life as if everything's fine because everyone around you is still doing the normal things? Yeah. Those are the parts that I really connect with. And so, yeah, I have conversations all the time with people that are like, yeah, I did this terrible thing happened to me and it's still terrible, but here's how I'm moving forward. Here's how I'm addressing things. And here's where I hope to be X amount of time from now. So, yeah, I mean, I feel like most people are going to have ups and downs, and it's just kind of how we move through them, and then we know better the next time.
If I can follow up on that, one of the things you said in there was things that happened to them. Sometimes pivots are also things that we do proactively. Do you find a distinction in how those have played out, or the kinds of things that people say and their experiences of things that they chose to do rather than things that occurred in their lives?
To be honest, yes. The answer is yes, but to be honest, I relate more to the ones that are similar to my story than the people that are this internal fire. Of course, there's lots of people that they've read a book one day and the one sentence really stuck out. They've read this book before, but this time, this sentence resonated with them, quit their job, started a brand new company, ran off and did all these things. It really comes down to them reflecting back and going, I had the confidence all along. I just needed to take the step. I just needed the push. I just needed the little edge. And if I'm being like kind of crass here, like those external moments that happen to us are also that push, that whatever it may be. And at the end of the day, most people are like, if I could go back to that person, I would tell them it'll all be okay. And that's like the most common thing. And you're like, well, yeah, it probably will, because we're humans and we're going to figure out how to do this and how move forward with it. But yeah, I relate more to the tragedies, which sound terrible, but that's just my own personal experience.
Well, I would think so, because there's all kinds of different degrees and you have so much credibility for what you've been through. I mean, how often are you dealing with serious PTSD? Because somebody's situation like mine, where I went through a pivotal moment in divorce and it was very dramatic and the way it happened was very dramatic, but I don't have like true PTSD, and people talk, you know, a trigger is not PTSD. So there's like so many varying degrees that you must deal with here, and vetting that must be difficult and responding to them must be difficult.
The responding part is hard. I've come to the realization that I think everyone, if they're ready to share their story, they should. Because there's someone out there that's listening that feels like they're the only person that's ever gone through a tricky divorce or a really challenging divorce, or has ever had a parent die when they were a kid, or has ever had a cancer diagnosis. But we're probably not the only ones. And so to hear someone that's like faced it, moved through it, maybe is doing better, is hopefully making them feel less alone. But to your point of like saying this kind of, I don't think you were comparing, but sometimes we do as humans. We're like, oh, your story is much harder than mine. But truthfully, our hardest moments are comparable to anyone else's hardest moment, because that's the hardest moment they've ever experienced. And so it's very relatable in that sense. And so I do get a lot of pushback from people where, because we naturally try to like, oh, my experience was much easier than yours. I couldn't imagine losing both parents, or I couldn't, whatever it may be. But truthfully, our hardest moments are our hardest moments, and that's the hardest we've ever had it. So I think it's a good thing to think about in that way.
Yeah,
that's a good point. Yeah, really good point.
They're really only comparable to our own previous earlier
yeah.
moments. And I got chills when you gave that response, Matt. That was fantastic. After the podcast is over, after you've had a session with a guest, not the end of the podcast, we don't want to, but when you've had the session and it ends and you're saying goodbye to your guest, do you follow up with them in any way? Is there any way that you continue the connection? And how do you help them move beyond their time with you into whatever is next for them?
I think I would say maybe 60% of the people that I've had these conversations with, I still have some kind of communication with, whether that's through email, whether that's social media of some sort. I think when you share an hour with someone about something so deep, you kind of naturally feel like you've walked out as something more than when you walked into it. And so for about 60% of my people, I try to just keep in touch, share things that they're doing in their life, because I think other people that are listening to my podcast are going to resonate with those people as well. So why not try to keep everyone in the loop and kind of keep a little bit of a community? I don't do anything majorly intentional, just kind of more of a relationship keeping, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's plenty. I mean, you do a lot for those people. And truly, Matt, it is a remarkable podcast. And I get something really important every time I listen to it. And I just commend you on creating that space for so many people, including yourself and me and the rest of the audience as listeners, because it's really important in this world. And you've done something really, really significant there.
I appreciate that. Like I said when I started, I don't think I could have a more fulfilling journey. Like, this just weirdly happenstance, and it's just been such a wonderful healing journey for myself, and hopefully, like you said, for other people listening, or even the people sharing their stories. Yeah,
well, congratulations on all of it. Again, the podcast is The Life Shift with our good friend Matt Gilhooly. So great to see you, and I look forward to grabbing coffee with you sometime soon.
Awesome. Great to meet you, Matt. Thanks, Matt. So much.
Take care.
He's such a smart guy and such a self-aware guy. He's also a very funny guy. I mean, you can tell his intelligence, right? So he's going to be funny. And yet he's holding this very serious, very sober space for a lot of people. If you haven't listened to the podcast, I'm floored every time. And I don't mean floored like I can't get up because I'm so emotionally overcome, but I always get something out of it. It is such a unique exploration into the human condition. And he shared some of that with us today.
Yeah, I sort of want to take the other side and be asked questions by him. Like, I want to do my own digging into this a little maybe deeper than we have even on this show yet. It's got me being more introspective about those pivotal moments in my own life, because there are several, like I mentioned one in particular. But yeah, I mean, it's significant to think about that. And yeah, it's deep. It's one of those things where we get into it on the surface on this show, but I think he digs a little deeper.
Oh, for sure he does. And again, right. Those are the different purposes of these shows, right? Ours is to go a little bit wide and talk about a lot of things in middle-aged life. And in middle age, we are having pivotal moments now. Again, things that happen to us or in our lives, or things that we proactively make happen. We also have the perspective of having lived a little bit to look back at earlier pivotal moments and maybe have better understandings of our previous selves, our younger selves in those moments, to be able to say, oh, I understand why I did that, or why I acted that way, or how I reacted to something. And maybe even be able to say to ourselves, well, if I had the knowledge 20 years ago that I have now, how would I have acted differently? And separately, given that I acted how I did, now that I understand it, how does that inform who I am now?
Yeah, I agree. And I think the other thing that you do over time is you realize that your lowest low can become your highest high. Like, you can really, like, as low as you've been, it can lead to places you would never have thought you would get to if you hadn't been that low, or you hadn't had that dark moment. So it takes you time, and it takes perspective, which you know is one of my favorite words. Yes. Perspective, which you cannot have until you've lived it and look backwards, that you don't have unless you go through those seminal moments.
If you're leading a productive life, an introspective life, you're going to have peaks and valleys. We're all going to have peaks and valleys. But if we really try to pay attention to them, that's right. Exactly what you're saying. We have to go through some darkness. We're going to go through some darkness. But to get the brightest light, we have to be able to look at that darkness and understand what we're experiencing in that moment, so that we can appreciate the light when we were in that moment.
Yeah, the other thing too is, I mean, people shouldn't feel, because I was almost like feeling guilty. Is my moment serious enough? Like, do you think about that? And the point that you guys both made was, no, everybody is their moment. It's their pivotal moment. They don't know anything else. So whether it's true PTSD from being in the military, or seeing things that nobody else has ever seen before, or very few people you think nobody else has seen before, there's somebody out there that's seen it, been through it, lived it, and they're going to be able to relate to you, so that you need to tell that story.
I loved having him on because he's so introspective, because he can share that introspection with others, and because it's such an interesting intersection of topics with what we do. And it's a great way to cap our guest episodes here on season 5 and pitch us forward to our 19th hole coming next week, actually coming in a couple of days if you're listening to this live, as we live stream for the first time our 1-year anniversary and then move into season 6.
Yeah, our live stream will be at 5:30 on December 5th. So if you're listening to this show right now, that is a Thursday night at 5:30. That episode then will be recorded and we will drop that like we normally do on Tuesday. So if you can't join us live at 5:30 on that Tuesday on the 5th, then please just listen and download when you normally would.
We like having you join us whenever, wherever, every week, whenever you can. We're just grateful for you and grateful for our guest and grateful for our entire team here on The Back Nine.
Hi, I'm Kevin Zurich with Three Bridges Consulting. If your company is considering podcast advertising, consider Three Bridges your go-to partner. We specialize in connecting your brand with the perfect podcast and podcast hosts to reach a highly targeted audience. Podcasts really provide a unique opportunity to speak directly to your core consumer in a very engaging and intimate format. If you know who your audience is, we will find them and ensure your story resonates. So give us a call today to discover how podcast advertising can enhance your overall media strategy. Our number, 760-590-7634. Again, 760-590-7634. We look forward to hearing from you.
Along with following us wherever you get your podcasts, please check us out on Instagram at back9_podcast. That's back, the number 9_podcast on Instagram.
This episode was hand-dipped by Janine Stella and recorded with Stella Mix Productions in Boca Raton, Florida.